Like we're gonna said, I want to talk about cancer and physical activity and exercise. And just to start off with, kind of some typical learning objectives for the presentation. I've got a box on my screen that's not going away for some reason. Um, there we go. So by the end of the presentation, what I hope to cover is kind of what is physical activity and exercise, because sometimes these terms get confused, and the guidelines for physical activity for those living with and beyond cancer. Um, I'll refer to kind of cancer throughout as living with and beyond, usually, just because from the moment of diagnosis, someone is living with cancer, and you can live with cancer up until even beyond remission. You still had cancer, even beyond that. The side effects and symptoms are still can be present. So I'm going to go over some benefits of physical activity and exercise for those living with beyond cancer and lung cancer. Some of the impacts of treatment on physical health and how exercise can be used to mitigate, and whether exercise can limit or reduce reoccurrence in survival outcomes. So a bit about me in this really smiley picture. My current area is exercise oncology. I'm studying a PhD in medical science, and I'm a research assistant on a few different projects. I've spent a while creating online educational resources for courses and personal trainers in this area. My education is an MSc, so a Master of Science in Clinical Exercise Physiology, and undergraduate in Sports Science, exercise oncology, digital tech, and how can we combine activity and digital tech within oncology populations. I'll forewarn everyone if they haven't realised yet, I am from Newcastle, so I've got a Geordie accent. If anyone can't understand, there's a raise hand function, I think, on Zoom somewhere. Just give me a raise and I'll try and go back and repeat. But a lot of the Americans and Aussies struggle with my accent, so I apologize. So we're going to start off with what is physical activity. And the technical definition is any movement from the body which is caused by skeletal muscle, which causes energy expenditure. And we measure energy expenditure in kilocalories. If anyone's been to a gym, you may see this on a treadmill or a bike or a Fitbit smartwatch. You'll see it in kilocalories, and that's how much energy we expend. Whereas exercise is a subcategory of physical activity, and it's more about the structured, repetitive, and pre-planned physical activity with the goal of maintaining or improving physical fitness. These terms get exchanged and interchanged a lot, and it causes a bit of confusion within my world. So I'm just equipping you with the knowledge now. If you ever get to a PT or whatever, and they misuse these terms, run the other direction, because they don't know what they're talking about. And physical activity, physical fitness, is a set of attributes that are either health or skill related. That could be balance, agility, stamina, speed, them kinds of qualities. So we're going to do a little activity. You can use the chat box or you can write these down. It's kind of up to you how we do it. But I just wanted to ask the group what they think of these 6 images, whether they're physical activity or exercise. And I'll share the answers after. So the first one, number 1, is regular breathing. Exercise is outdoors. This could be sitting down in the house, or it could be in the forest like this gentleman here with a lovely backdrop. Number 2 is going to the gym, doing some weights or on a treadmill. Number 3 is this adorable little child. It's looking after children or grandchildren or child minding. Number 3 is making a cup of tea or coffee. In my case, it would be coffee. Number 5 is heavy intensity exercise, such as weightlifting. So whereas number 2 is the gym, this is specifically weightlifting. And number 6 is doing housework, such as doing dishes or vacuuming. So have a think for a second of which one could be which one's a physical activity and which one's an exercise. And if everyone's happy, I can see Jenny. So Jenny, if you're happy, I'm just going to see a nod of your head and I'll share the answers.
Okay, yep. Go ahead.
Amazing. So I've got down number 1 as exercise. This is a kind of a controversial one because just breathing exercises in general, you are looking at maintaining or improving physical fitness, your breathing rate and capacity. Number 2, again, exercise. You are deliberately going somewhere to increase or maintain your physical fitness. Number 3, you're not usually looking to increase or maintain physical fitness when looking after a child, although you do a lot of running around, picking them up, and they can be quite heavy. And it is a challenge, but unless you've got that notion of going out your way to increase or maintain physical fitness, I would class this as physical activity. Again, making a cup of tea. In fairness, my kettle's fairly heavy, but I don't go out my way to maintain physical fitness. So I would class this as exercise. Physical activity, sorry. Number 5, I would say exercise. You are deliberately going somewhere to increase your physical fitness. Whereas number 6, again, I would say physical activity, just because you're not going out your way to increase your or maintain fitness. However, saying that, I have a long shaggy rug in my house, and vacuuming that rug is one of the hardest things to do in my house. It's probably harder than most of my gym sessions, I must admit. So when we discuss exercise and cancer, we normally refer to this nice little flow diagram. And exercise can help at many stages of the cancer pathway, which is this image here, but sometimes the terms get mixed up. So you'll see the name of the stage and where exercise fits in. So pre-treatment is before you've had the treatment. You'll do something called prehabilitation. And prehab is about preparing the body as best you can to withstand and mitigate the impacts of the treatment. During the treatment phase, you've got symptom control. So minimizing things like fatigue and nausea, muscle aches, which can be very prevalent and common with during the treatment phase. Post-treatment, you've usually had a bout of radiotherapy or chemotherapy, potentially surgery. That's wiped out your system. You feel pain, you feel fatigue, you can experience breathlessness. This is where we'll start building the body back up from all them nasty side effects that you'll experience during the treatment phase. And where my work fits in is kind of past this rehabilitation phase, which is the survivorship, so promoting health, helping people engage, and then palliative care, which is usually the end of care, where we increase their quality of life. So they've got a little bit of a nicer time before they are at end of life stages. And you can see a nice red box here, which is where my work fits. I do a lot of survivorship and palliative care work. There's a really nice kind of area of research coming out now around prehabilitation. A lot of kind of the Canadians are doing that and the Aussies. But hopefully in a few months, we'll pick up on that as well, and we'll start, because it is a really, really unique area. Rightio. So the guidelines of physical activity, and I'm going to go through some of these terms in a little bit in more depth, but I've broken it down into being active and resistance and functional training. So you can see here, I've got 150 to 300 minutes moderate activity, or 75 to 100 vigorous activity. For some reason, the government decided that the activity guidelines for those living with beyond cancer are the same for those healthy individuals. This is because that we are aware that there's benefits at these numbers for those living with and beyond cancer. The question comes in that it can be difficult for those living with and beyond cancer to reach these values. And I'm going to discuss this a bit later about maintaining and engaging with this population, but these are the kind of ranges that we're looking at. And I'm going to go into what these two terms, moderate and vigorous, mean on the next slide. But what we expect and what we strive for is to get an individual to meet the 150 minutes of moderate or 75 vigorous. We also encourage 2 resistance training sessions per week. So resistance training refers to things like weightlifting or doing kind of intensity bounding. So that could be jumping exercises. I don't encourage jumping exercises with the population though. And resistance doesn't have to be lifting heavy weights. It could be simply lifting a gallon of milk, some cans of soup, or even shopping bags. So you can find exercise in the most unique ways, I suppose. And then we also encourage functional training. So this includes balance and strength training. So a combination of balance and strength training, because risk of falls and reduced muscle mass is very, very common in the population. And with the brittle bones, that can be a very common impact. Balance training, which can reduce fall risk, is substantial and can be extremely important. So this is quite a busy slide, and I'm just highlighting this slide briefly, just because it's put on by the American College of Sports Medicine. It covers some of the doses that they expect, that they portray for the evidence of either aerobic, which is things like running, resistance, which is weightlifting or lifting heavy weights, or just weights in general, or the combination, which is what we strive for, is not just one or the other. And you can see down here that fatigue, health-related quality of life, function, kind of mood symptoms, and this one's more for lymphedema as well. But also there's moderate evidence for bone health and sleep. So there's a lot of positive outcomes that can be found by doing exercise for those living with and beyond cancer. Where is that slide? Oh, I skipped a slide, I apologize. I was looking for this slide. So as I promised, I'm going to go over these two terms, the moderate and vigorous activity. So how do we measure these outputs? We measure them in something called metabolic equivalent of tasks. We refer to this as METs. You won't really need to remember that because most of the time PTs and gyms and things don't really go over these too much. But it's nice to have that knowledge. And I always strive to equip my clients with the best knowledge when I'm working. So the best way to describe it is one MET is equivalent to sitting quietly. So just sitting down, watching the world go by. That's equivalent to one MET. So for example, 4 METs will be 4 times more than just sitting quietly. So like I said in the previous slide, that moderate exercise, you're looking at 3 to 5.9 METs. That's how we would define moderate exercise. An example of that would be a brisk walk. And during the brisk walk, a way to tell if it's brisk or not is, can you hold a light conversation or sing? So for example, if you're walking with a friend with a coffee, if you can have a light conversation, it's more than likely a brisk walk. If you can sing, I don't know if you're singing with your friend on the walk or if you're singing in the shower, but that would be normally moderate activity. If you're showering too hard and you can't sing, slow down your shower, first of all. But that's kind of where that nice, easy way of remembering it. Whereas vigorous would be 6 or more METs. So this is a large amount of stress in the body. You're unable to hold a conversation. I don't know if anyone's been for a jog or a bike ride at any point in their life and they've been panting. You can't hold a conversation. If you can, I give you credit. But these are exercises such as running and swimming. Sometimes gardening can be really vigorous, especially, I don't know, where you turn over the soil. That's got a proper name. I apologize if I insult any gardeners. I can't remember what it's called. Football, again, carrying heavy weights, and this will also include carrying heavy shopping. My job typically is to carry the shopping in from the car, and I'll try and get as many bags as I can, and sometimes it is way too heavy, and I can't talk. So we went over this slide. So the symptoms versus physical activity, so from cancer. So in the red box, you're going to see a list of symptoms that are very prevalent and common amongst those living with and beyond cancer, and indeed lung cancer. Some of the most common ones are fatigue or tiredness, depression and anxiety, breathlessness, which is we know as dyspnea, pain, restlessness, sleep, reduced immune function, reduced bone density, so your bones become a little bit, there's a reduction in the density of the bone there, reduction in muscle mass and size and strength of the muscle, and something called chemo brain. So chemo brain is, if anyone's experienced that, is you kind of get a cloudy sensation in your brain when you can't really think of things clearly and something's on the tip of your tongue but you can't say it. That's what I've kind of learned working with the population. And interestingly, if we look at the green box, they're quite similar in terms of whatever these symptoms are over here, they're mirrored over here. So fatigue and tiredness, exercise has been shown to reduce the levels of fatigue. Depression and anxiety, exercise has been shown to improve mood, with reduced reports of depression and anxiety being alleviated. Breathlessness, again, improved. I won't go through them all, but you can get the idea. So there is a nice relationship, a reciprocal relationship here, and this is what kind of guides our research, that we know that there's evidence, and we can see the evidence that exercise is beneficial, but it's really what do we do with this information from now? So we know the benefits, so what can we then do with it? With lung cancer, muscles and bones can be impacted, and lung tissue may become damaged due to things like surgery or another common treatment method of radiotherapy. And individuals, it's hard to explain, but individuals can get a much reduced functional capacity without even having surgery. So just radiotherapy, they can have that damage to the lung tissue. It can become quite fibrous, or the flexibility and the stretch is no longer there. And it can cause dysfunction to the organ systems related to physical activities, when it can minimize things like breathing, respiratory exchange, and things like that. So by learning how we can increase the damage that's being brought to the lung through these treatments, we can help mitigate and help people breathe better, essentially. So for example, if exercise capacity is decreased because lung volume and the compliance are, sorry, I made a spelling mistake in my notes there. So if there's a damage and, for example, the lung tissue can't stretch as much, we might not be able to forcibly contract the lungs to perform breathing and respiration. So what can we do for this? We can do exercise and things like running or cycling or swimming to reduce that weight, or the cross trainer, if anyone has seen one of them, the things you use your arms, your legs for. We can start breathing again, and we can start using the lungs, and using the muscles can help strengthen them, even though they're damaged, or there's damage to the lungs, or even if you've got partially removed. Our body can learn to adapt. Our body's phenomenal at adapting and coping with these kind of things. So what will happen is intercostal muscles, the muscles in between your ribs, can strengthen. It'll help pull the lung out a little bit, and it'll aid in that process of contracting and relaxing the lung. So although there's damage there, the body does adapt, and it can overcome some of the barriers. And one of the last points I've got is muscular endurance can increase. So how long a muscle can work before fatiguing or tiring out. So when we say fatigue, and we're talking about when a muscle works up into a point it can no longer work anymore. If anyone's been on a run or a walk and they went so far and they can no longer go anymore, you just feel your legs are so heavy, you can't keep going. That's when we're talking about fatigue. And slowly increasing exercises, your exercise capacity, can help the muscles last longer. So although you've got a reduction in your capacity to breathe, the muscles can strengthen, which can then increase that, but they can also work for longer. So this is a table by Schmitz, a researcher from America, and just nicely highlighted here that some of the common side effects or impacts from common curative treatments. And you can see up here, and it's quite prevalent amongst most cancers, that pain and fatigue. Most types of treatments, pain and fatigue is a common denominator. When we talk about cardiovascular, we're talking about the kind of the heart system, pulmonary, the breathing, cognitive, that kind of the brain, immune system, immune function, lymphedema, and organ function. But constantly we'll come back to this fatigue and this pain, and you can see all the way throughout nearly all the treatments, these are the two most common symptoms that I deal with when I'm working with the individuals. Interestingly, targeted therapy and a new thing called immunotherapy is quite a recent thing, to be honest, coming out, and we're still learning about the impacts of immunotherapy. And one of the things that we've started to notice is, like other things like chemo, there's dermatological impacts of things like your hair and your nails. If anyone's had immunotherapy, you might realize brittle nails you'll do a task and a nail will just snap or crack. And the nail hardening, it's like a nail varnish. I see people wearing it. It sometimes doesn't work because the root of the nail is damaged, and they don't repair as well. And again, you get kind of your hair can come out. It can be very frail and brittle, and you'll brush your hair and it'll just come out. So I want to really highlight that these two, I'm going to talk about these two a lot more in detail, but these two are very common and they are often misunderstood. So a specific one usually to breathlessness and things like COPD is breathlessness, to lung cancer and COPD is this notion of breathlessness. So we medically know this as dyspnea, and it is a distressing experience. If anyone's experienced a bout of breathlessness, it can be extremely stressful, worrying, and in fact, the stress caused by breathlessness and being breathless can exacerbate and cause a further cycle of breathlessness, unfortunately. There's 3 different types of breathlessness. So there's the acute breathlessness, which often lasts a few minutes. It develops and lasts for a few minutes. These are quite sudden attacks. There's subacute, which develop over an hour or days. If anyone's had subacute, they can kind of feel themselves breathless and it doesn't go away. You kind of manage it over the few hours or even days. And then there's the severe chronic breathlessness, which develops over weeks or even months. And I deal with a lot of individuals who have experienced all 3 of these. And I really don't want to play down the fact that these are extremely frightening and extremely stressing. There's a whole host of physiology behind why we experience breathlessness, but one of the things I want to discuss is this fight or flight response, and especially in relation to exercise. So for those who aren't aware of the fight or flight response, it's usually a response that kicks in by the body. For example, if you're crossing the street and you see a car coming towards you, your body will immediately tell you to hopefully jump out of the way, because the other alternative is to stand there and fight the car. That's not advisable. But there's other instances where we can fight. And you see this a lot of, if something happens like a ball falls when you're doing dishes, you can quickly jump and catch it. That's kind of that fight response. But when we become breathless or experience an episode of breathlessness, it can be really hard to catch your breath, and that can cause a really high level of anxiety. And the body will then release adrenaline because you're starting to panic. And although it thinks it's doing good, adrenaline, when it hits your heart, increases heart rate, which can then increase breathing rate. And increasing breathing rate is kind of the opposite of what you really want when you have an episode of breathlessness. You want to kind of calm yourself down and bring yourself back to a normal level. So the reason I want to touch on this in relation to exercise is because exercise does make you breathless, and you can experience breathlessness. However, I just reassure my clients that you will return back to a normal level of your breathing rate. Although clients tend not to believe me at first because they say, but you don't understand. And it's true, I haven't got the same episode of breathlessness they do. But I want to just kind of advocate that it will return down to a normal rate. And if not, there's positions to help ease breathlessness. I know Cambridge University have a lovely flyer, which I can send around to Jenny and Deborah if anyone would like to look at it. And it's about kind of the ways that you can help mitigate breathlessness. And one of the really interesting things is an increase of leg muscle strength could actually improve your breathing rate. So things like the femur, around the femur, the upper leg, you've got a bunch of large muscles, the quadriceps and the hamstrings. Evidence has shown an increase in the size of these muscles could actually help breathing. You get something called oxidative enzymes and a bigger amount of slow twitch muscle fibers, which can help the length of time that we can breathe, the longer term muscles that can provide longer term energy. So things like sit to stands or even walking upstairs can increase leg strength. And this is a really interesting finding, especially for me, because I make a lot of my clients who are quite severely breathless just do sit to stands from a chair. And it does have a lot of benefits. I'll touch on this briefly because I know this group doesn't really have much experience with surgery and it's not really that too prevalent. But surgery is a standard approach with lung cancer in the early stages. Surgery often causes pain and fatigue, breathlessness, or that shortness of breath. I've mentioned that breathlessness spiral, which is you kind of get worried about being breathless, exercise that makes you breathless. So that makes you more breathless because you're panicking, your heart rate increases, your breathing rate increases. It can be quite a hard loop. It's a vicious cycle, I suppose. But we call it the breathlessness spiral. But for those who have went through thoracic surgeries, such as a portion of the lung removed or the full lung, pulmonary rehab, so walking and breathing exercises, have been shown to increase exercise tolerance, reduce the level of dyspnea, and increase overall quality of life. And one study here, you'll see the number 12, that's just a reference, is a daily brisk walk program for 12 weeks following a surgery actually showed a 1 second improvement in FEV1, which is the forced expiratory volume, in the first second, and forced vital capacity. So the FEV1 is basically if you were to suddenly breathe out really hard, the amount of oxygen you can get out in the first second. So it does show that there is more airflow coming out, basically. In relation to EGFR and ALK, when I looked into this more, so I've touched upon it a few times, but I've done a bit of a deep dive in the literature. And unfortunately, there's not actually a lot in relation to exercise. And it sparked the question of really why. And the best I can come up with is that lung cancer itself is under-researched. And they research a lot of the cancers related to smoking and not the genetic mutations, which is quite shocking. However, I did find two studies that were good studies. I found two good studies. There's a couple of observational case report on individuals, but these are larger studies with at least a few participants. And they observed improvements for those who are living with EGFR of cardiovascular, respiratory, and muscular improvements over an 8-week trial. Now, this trial combined exercises that were aerobic, so I think it was walking. It combined walking exercises and resistance training exercises. Again, this one used EGFR and ALK. The other one was only the EGFR group. Physical activity, symptom, and quality of life were maintained. So there wasn't a reduction over the time, but there wasn't actually an improvement in this group. While tiredness did decrease significantly. When I say significantly, that means statistically. There was a reduction in tiredness, which links into fatigue. So those who did these exercises did feel slightly less tired, but their overall quality of life just maintained. And these were measured by questionnaires. Exercise classes, which they also did, acute clinical meaningful reductions in fatigue, tiredness, depression, and increased energy. So those who did the exercise classes with other people, so this was in a group setting, it wasn't individual, they actually did find reductions in the fatigue, the tiredness, some depression, levels of pain, and it also increased their overall energy. So they felt more energetic and they felt like they could do more. There's a lot of literature around exercise classes versus standalone exercise. And one of the big things that we're finding is people in a group setting tend to exercise a little bit harder, a little bit more, as when they're by themselves. One of the things that we think or is reported commonly is they feel more accountable in a group setting. You have a great level of accountability, whether that be to your peers or to the individual leader who's delivering the session. One of the questions I'm striving to look for is how can we mimic that virtually or from the home setting, because not everyone can make it to the gym or online setting. And so Zoom's proving very useful. It's only since the start of the pandemic Zoom really took off, which is surprising, but it sparked a lot of interest in these populations. But yeah, I wanted to really highlight that there's not a great bunch of research out there, which is quite frustrating. So I'm not sure where these lines came on, but I'm not sure to get rid of them. So if anyone can see these lines, I apologize. So personalization, this is one of the biggest things I tell everybody, whether they're exercising or delivering exercises. So I'm going to say something probably so cheesy, I'm going to lose some folks, but everyone is different. Think of a snowflake. If I said this to my mother, she'd probably tell me that I'm being way too cheesy, but it's true. Everyone is different, and it's very rare to find two snowflakes the same. Everyone has different tolerances, different treatment types, different pre-diagnosis and post-diagnosis stages of fitness. They've got people that also enjoy different things. I wouldn't make someone who hates running on a treadmill run on a treadmill because that's just torture. If I'll go through my clients what they like, and I'll try and help them achieve that. So a lot of clients don't like running, to be honest. A lot of them love cycling. So I normally just take up all the bikes in the gym when I'm working with my clients. So the prior, like I said, prior sensitivity levels in lung cancer specific, you've got breathlessness and the fear of breathlessness. Some people have this view of self-inflicted stigma, and it's so big with lung cancer, and it frustrates me whenever I hear it, because some people I've even had professionals say, "Why work with this group? They self-inflicted this. They smoked. They brought it on themselves." And I kind of explain how angry it makes us. I get so annoyed, and people just ignore the fact that you can even get it by radon or secondhand parents who smoke or genetic mutations. Like it. Oh, I'm not going to go too far into it, but the self-inflicted stigma is real, and people also don't feel like they can go to the gym or can say they've got lung cancer. I've had people who try to get around telling me they've got lung cancer because they feel ashamed, and yeah, it's really upsetting. And my biggest thing, if anything today, is we need to get rid of that stigma. It's awful. And then there's the older and not motivated stigma. I've had individuals tell me that lung cancer is typically an elderly cancer and that they don't want to exercise. They're too frail and they just don't want to do it. They're not motivated. Again, couldn't be further from the truth. I meet people with lung cancer from all different ages. Typically, they are in the elderly group, but I've met a whole host of different people working with the hospitals, and they are motivated. I don't know where this unmotivated part came from. There can be some of the most determined individuals you meet. Like any population, you do get unmotivated individuals, but that does not account for the whole population. So there is a lot of time spent trying to, in research, convince people it's a worthwhile population to explore. And these are the things that I encounter. But when I would go to a gym and when I would invite a client in, the typical things I would go through is their type of treatment they received and the type of cancer. If there's any components I need to know about, their prior physical activity level and knowledge. So if they've been to a gym for many years before, they've got a good knowledge. If they don't know how to do something or if they've got a limited knowledge, I know I need to start at a foundational level. One of the most important things I find is what your goals are. So I can make goals for everyone if I wanted to, but it really comes down to what you want to get out of it in an exercise session. Like I said, what you enjoy. I've got a lot of clients who hate running on treadmills, so I put them on bikes. And also, it's a lot less impact on joints and can help with bone mets, which I'm going to come into in a second. And specifically to lung cancer, about breathlessness as well. Like I said, and reassuring them at the start that breathlessness exercise can make you breathless. Not telling them and letting them feel that breathlessness can cause far greater problems. So it's better to be upfront, honest, and say, hey, if we experience it, we can keep going. If you want to stop, just let me know and we'll stop and we'll ease down. Don't stop immediately, we'll ease down to a safe, comfortable level. Rightio, bone mets. And we're going to do a little bit of physics as well with this one, fun with physics I've got down here. So there's different types of bone mets, and bone mets are really common within those living with lung cancer, especially with genetic mutations. So a bone met, for someone who doesn't know, stands for a bone metastasis, which is when cells from a primary cancer site travel around the body and land normally on a bone. And they can spread and travel, and these cancerous cells can proliferate, which means kind of rapidly grow, and they can cause a lot of problems. So there's different types. There's osteolytic, osteoblastic, and a mix. So the mix is both. So really, there's only two main types, and there's the mixed type. So osteolytic is when the process of bones that form through osteoclasts. So osteoclasts are laid down, which creates new bone. This process is altered. And new bone cannot be laid down. So when bones get kind of worn away, they get the thinner. New bone struggles to get laid down, which can cause brittle bones and it can easily fracture. There's osteoblastic, which when too much bone basically gets laid down. So this may sound good at the start, where you think, yeah, I've got a lot of bone, it can be really strong. No, bones need to be a little bit flexible. Not too flexible, almost not. But there needs to be a bit of flexibility. And when new bone gets laid down too much, it becomes really thick and really tough. And if you push too far, it'll just snap. They also become really rigid because there's more bone getting laid down where there shouldn't be. And this can cause the bones to become really thick and rigid and painful if you do any kind of movements because there's too much bone there, basically. This one's quite common within prostate cancer usually, but we do see osteoblastic within small cell lung cancer. And this one's more common. Osteolytic is common in non-small cell. So although the two primary types is non-small cell and small cell, you are likely to have, I think, up to 40% of individuals can have a bone met. And if some people also do get the mixture, so you do have both. Bone can struggle to be laid down, but bones become really thick and rigid because the parts that are able to lay down, they get really thick. So what will we do with this? This is the exercise portion. So in physics, there's something called levers and fulcrums, and you'll see this is me attempting to draw a seesaw. It's not the best seesaw, but this is the analogy of a bicep curl. So for someone who doesn't know what a bicep curl is, it's that motion where you pick up a weight and you curl your arm, and the bicep, that muscle there, will flex. So imagine the green is your hand where the arm is. This whole arm is your lever, and the fulcrum is the point at where it bends. So that will be the elbow for us. The representation of this would be in a bicep curl is how we can help people who have a humeral met or a ulnar or radial met. How can we help them do an exercise? There's a lot of evidence coming out in Australia right now about bone mets. And originally people said, if you've got a bone met, don't exercise. It's too dangerous. You could break a bone. It can be very dangerous. It can cause further damage. Your body's already got a weakened immune system. It could lead to infections as well. But there's evidence coming out now saying that exercise can be beneficial if we personalize. Everything has to be personal. So if you have bone met in a certain location, either don't exercise that location or exercise it gently. So in this term, in terms of levers and fulcrums, if we extend our arm really far out, it can be really difficult to maintain a weight. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to hold something with an extended arm. It gets tiring extremely quickly because it takes more effort. Whereas if you hold it really tight into your chest, you can hold something for quite a while. So if someone's got a bicep met, we can do very light exercises of bicep curls. And what we'll do is we'll just reduce that lever. So we'll bring it from here and we'll just bring the elbow in so it's closer to the body. And that can help us do exercise in a safe way. Alternatively, if someone's got a bone met in a location and it may be worth not exercising that location at the start, we can do other exercises. So if you've got a bone met in your arm, but nothing in your lower limbs, you can still do lower limb exercises. So it's really about working with your clinician, your physician, to help tailor the activity. And as a professional within this area, one of the first things I ask is there any but do you have any bone metastases that I should know about? And along with that, we also have pain. So pain is such a unique area because pain, people view pain as, oh, I fell over, I've got a pain in my leg, or I banged my knuckle on the door, or I stubbed my toe, I've got pain. Pain is so hard to convey, and there's actually 8 different types of common pain, which is acute, chronic, breakthrough pain, bone pain, which is what the Mets link into, soft tissue, so things like organs and tissues can become inflamed, nerve pain, so tumors can press on nerves, or treatments can cause this. You get things like peripheral neuropathy, tingling, referred pain. So if you've got pain somewhere else, so for example, if you've got liver pain, a liver tumor, your brain can mistake the pain for your shoulder, for example, you get shoulder pain. And phantom pain, so if you've had a mastectomy for breast cancer, for example, you can still get pain in that area. So all these different types of pain, and people still don't appreciate the severity of how painful a treatment or a tumor can be. And when working on exercise, I've seen a lot of people say, oh, you've got a bit of, you experiencing pain, go and exercise, it'll help. Some people tell them to exercise like a slap in the face. It's a challenge, and it can be really difficult to get up and exercise. The amount of pain people can be in is excruciating pain, especially if it's chronic long-term pain. So it's working, there's a lot of research now that said benefits, but we need to focus on how to get people to exercise safely and how to help them realize and get them into a position where they can exercise. Some people have pain just standing up. So you start off with just standing exercises. If you tell someone who's got pain walking upstairs to go for a run, they'll give you a funny look because it's not feasible. So where you start off at a place that's personalized and tailored to the individual. And like I said, I see it a lot with people who say pain, I've got pain, and they'll say, okay, exercise can help. But getting them to the point where they can exercise is a different question altogether. Muscle pains is very common. So you'll get pains in the muscles, that kind of soft tissue area. And this is also called myalgia, so muscle pain. And it can be caused by either inflammation or even a reduction in the muscle mass. So through cancer and through treatments, we can actually lose muscle mass, or it's called muscular atrophy, where whereas strength builds muscle can just wear away over time. So if you are in treatment and you're really fatigued and have a lot of pain and you're recovering, during that recovery phase, your muscles do start to waste away. And it can be really difficult to do basic and daily activities like getting up and going to the toilet. We also have this syndrome called cachexia. Now, cachexia is an extremely complex muscular wasting disorder or syndrome, which basically it's due to a chronic disease, and it's a metabolic. It's very, very complex, and we're only now finding evidence about how exercise impacts cachexia. But it does cause a reduction in muscle mass and some other concerns. However, I said it's complex. We don't really understand the deeper root of how exercise can help it on a holistic scale. But there's evidence saying that exercise can increase or reduce the rate of cachexia and increase physical function. It's just such a complex disorder syndrome, but there's evidence saying that it does help. Hopefully in the next few years or months we'll find out more about it, but right now it is a bit elusive. So before I move on from the slide, I just really want to reiterate that pain is such a strong and prevalent, one of the most commonly reported side effects and impacts from treatment, and that it's not something, and don't feel disheartened if at first you can't get up and do exercise if you're in too much pain. But just know that exercise can help alleviate pain, and there's different levels. Exercise and activity doesn't have to be, like we said before, start going to the gym or going for a run. Just start off small with physical activity. And if, for example, if your partner or children or someone makes you a cup of tea, try and get up and do it yourself. If not, just go and fill the kettle up. Kettles can get really heavy. So even just walking to there and back is a good start. Maybe lifting the kettle up. Or if you are a little bit more able, you can go for a walk around the block. Sorry, that's American. Walk around the street or the neighborhood. Walk to someone's house when COVID eases up. Although exercise in lockdown's been very difficult, especially if you've been told to isolate. But we're all easing up now, and the weather's getting a bit nicer as well. So one of the most common questions I get asked is, will exercise reduce my reoccurrence of a cancer? This is asked to me a lot more than I thought it would be when working in exercise. And it is a really big question because people, they hear exercise beneficial. And one of the big things that people strive for is this reduction in reoccurrence. And honestly, there's little evidence available. Like I said at the start, the three biggest kind of cancers is breast, prostate, and lung cancer. And not surprising that breast and prostate have this evidence and lung cancer really hasn't got evidence, because these two cancers are researched typically a lot more than lung cancer. So there's supportive and suggestive evidence that it can reduce reoccurrence. But one of the things that research tells us that is limited evidence or not strong evidence does not mean there is no evidence. It just means we haven't found the evidence. So no literature does not mean it doesn't exist. But in terms of reoccurrence, or this golden question, as I get asked, it may not reduce reoccurrence, but it does have a lot of evidence to increase quality of life, reduce fatigue, tiredness, and increase mood. So there is beneficial properties and protective factors there. It can also increase immune function. But in terms of actual reoccurrence, there's limited evidence out there right now that I would say high-level evidence. I'm just going to go over one of my latest research articles, which is about doing online supportive care for lung cancer. So, is online supportive care feasible? And online supportive care could be anything from Zoom to text messages or like apps to remote monitoring. So you report your symptoms to a server, and this server will ping your GP or clinician if you've got high levels of symptoms that cause for concern. One of the big things that I found was some people had the notion of it's typically an older disease or non-communicable disease group, so they're not as tech savvy. They can't use phones and they can't use computers very well. Not true. Online supportive care is feasible and acceptable. So feasible means it's possible to be done, and acceptable means it's well taken and uptaken by the group. And from my findings, the three areas of supportive care currently being investigated or explored is physical activity feasible, acceptable? So that's like delivering online programs or PT sessions via Zoom. Education, so providing people with documents or information about breathlessness or exercising. This could be in forms of paper form or written forms. Also eating healthy, so if you've had chemo, the alcoholic acidity can make it hard to stomach, these kind of things. And also symptom monitoring. This is really common right now during the pandemic, in terms of doctors will have clients or patients fill out an online form. If their score is a score that's high or considered dangerous, they'll get a notification, they'll give you a call back. Whereas if your scores are still low and you're seen to be relatively healthy within the population group, you will get an email that says, okay, great, thanks for reporting this information. We'll contact you in 2 weeks for another checkup. So it can also take away that contact. But this can also be a daily thing if you're more severe. So every day you wake up and you report on a survey, and it helps sort of make a diary or track your symptoms. So this is the article that we done. And I want to highlight the very bottom line of my abstract is people living with me on lung cancer display a very high symptom burden and unmet supportive care needs. Often these burdens are higher than most other cancers. More research is needed to address the dearth of literature of online supportive care. So what I'm saying here is it's feasible, but not many people are exploring it. So we need more people to explore it. Why is no one exploring it? And it's right at the start of the session, I explained that I get held up on this fact that it's under-researched, and I don't understand why. I don't know if it's because there's more funds in other places, but we need more evidence in this area. And lastly, I'm just going to do the promo of I'm doing a study, like Jenny said, and I can send this flyer out again. Apologies for those who did step forward. We had an issue with the server being housed in Australia, and there's some issues around server. So we're rectifying that, and it should be starting shortly. And just a quick review of what we went over today is what was physical activity and the exercise guidelines. So that was the difference of exercise and physical activity in the 150 to 50 resistance training and balance and strength exercises. The benefits of physical activity, the impacts of treatments on physical health, and we've also touched on mental health as well there a bit, and reoccurrence and survival. So we've touched on all them kind of things. And I couldn't help, but I saw this dog and I thought it was incredibly cute, so I put it in. Is there any questions? If there's any questions after this as well, you can feel free to email me. But yeah, I'm happy to, there's some references of the articles I used. I'm happy to answer any questions now as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jordan. I think that was incredibly informative and useful. And I think that it's great that you're doing research in this area. I think everybody here would agree that lung cancer is a very under-researched area compared with other cancers, not just in the exercise sphere, but generally. So it's fantastic to have somebody who is actually interested in lung cancer and interested in helping those with lung cancer, you know, improve their quality of life. And I have to say, from a personal point of view, I'm a massive fan of exercise. Many of you will know, I'm on my 5th line treatment in 3 years. And I think exercise has been incredibly useful to me. And I have actually managed to exercise throughout many targeted drugs, radiotherapy, you know, 2 different courses of chemo. I've even the week of chemo, I've been out there exercising, and I think it's helped me mentally and physically. So I'm particularly interested in everything that you say, but I'm going to hand over to Deborah now, who has got questions for you, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Thanks. And I'd like to offer my thanks as well, Jordan. It was really interesting and informative, and great to hear that even if we've got, for anyone that's got reduced lung capacity, we can improve that with exercise. So that's, you know, even more of a reason for everyone of us to start. So, but like Jenny, I'm a real advocate of exercise. And one of the consequences actually of this morning is we will ensure that everybody in the EGFR group is aware and able to join the ALK group exercise class that we run on Zoom on a Friday. So so anyone, as a consequence of listening today, wants to join, because there's no reason not to now. We've just heard it from the expert. We should all be exercising, so anyone can join. But in the meantime, what I wanted to do is start the questions off. We put the opportunity out for people to ask questions, and so these are some of the ones that have come back, Jordan. So the first one does follow on. I just thought it would be useful to reiterate. I know you've covered off brain mets, which is great. Bone mets, but just to reiterate. One of the questions that came in is, are there any forms of exercise which should be avoided, particularly in regard to spinal mets? And from another member, my husband has bone mets and has been advised not to run on concrete. So 2 questions there specifically. What are your thoughts?
With spinal mets, and also kind of another issue with the spine is kind of you get bony spurs as well within this population, which is quite common. There is certain exercises that can be done that don't invoke a large risk to that area. So things where you engage in the core and the back, where you're compressing the spine, so for example, squats, or you're lifting overhead. These muscles in the back, especially around the spine, called the erector spinae, when they're working too hard, that them turns can increase the risk of injury. I would advise with spinal mets, particularly in spurs and things like that, any exercise on the back would be not so ideal. Lying down on the floor, on the back, moving a lot. It's not very comfortable either, to be honest. And like the individual who said running on concrete, these high impact exercises, so like bounding exercises or lifting overhead or kind of really pulling weights, that can cause damage. But that being said, it's the turning of the trunk as well. The spine helps to turn the trunk. But any exercises can be done safely with supervision from a health professional. I wouldn't say with spinal mets that you can't do exercise. There's definitely things you can do. It's just got to be light. Don't go running a marathon or lifting really heavy weights. Start off light. And I think one of the biggest issues with exercise, and this is for all bone mets, is that people view it as exercise as an intense exercise. It can be anything, even breathing exercises, sitting down, breathing, and using your tummy control. That's a form of exercise. So my advice would be start off easy, avoid kind of high impact activities, and speak to a either professional, healthcare professional, exercise physiologist, or exercise oncologist, as some of them are also called. With regard to the running on pavement, yeah, so it's come back to physics again. Is when you impact on a hard surface, that force has got to go somewhere, and normally it can go back into the body. So I would, if you've got bone met in the lower part of your body, walking can be very beneficial. Light walking, having some good pair of shoes, but swimming, bike riding can also be really, really useful. Swimming specifically can take the weight off the lower half of the body. If you've got mets up in the body and maybe in the shoulder or things, that's a different question. But bike riding, especially the recline bike with the seat, that's the one that most of my clients like to work on, or swimming. So my advice would be there is things you can do, but start off slow and work up and find where your limit is.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. One of the other questions we had was fatigue is one of my side effects. And in terms of, do you have specific recommendations for exercising with fatigue?
Fatigue is also, like pain, very misunderstood, I think. And when other people, if you tell someone you're fatigued, they'll just think you're tired. You haven't slept enough. And it's not the case. Fatigue with cancer is literally, you are wiped out. Sometimes you cannot even lift your phone up. You're so wiped out. In them instances, honestly, one of my advices would be don't feel bad for taking some rest. Some people feel really guilty for taking a rest. And for all, be it smartwatches, I have an Apple Watch and it reminds me to move all the time. It can be quite annoying sometimes. Fitbits also do it. If you're taking a rest day, Fitbits tell you to move can be really demotivating and irritating. Don't feel bad for taking a rest. If you are feeling fatigued, do what you can. Don't push yourself too hard. One of the biggest things that I was told by a client is they were fatigued and they walked for as long as they could somewhere. That was only halfway because they had to walk back. They didn't think about that part. They walked somewhere, which is phenomenal, and they forgot how to walk back. So do as much as you can. If you're feeling fatigued, understand your body, listen to your body. There will be times when you can do exercise and take advantage of those times, but don't feel guilty for taking a rest day. We all do it. Even the people who do go to the gym excessively, they need rest days. Your body needs time to repair.
Excellent, that's good to know. Thank you very much. I think you'll stop a lot of our members feeling very guilty now. So another question, I weigh 19 stone and a lot of my weight gain has been caused by cancer meds. How much exercise should I do?
When it comes to weight, if it's about weight reduction, this is it's more of a dietary concern. Exercise can help. Diet and exercise combined will help weight loss. There's no golden rule for exercise and weight, really. No matter how much someone weighs, I would still advise hitting them 150 to 300 or 75 to 100 minutes. unfortunately, some of the medications do make it difficult to lose weight and things. And you've got to, as difficult as it can be, you've got to acknowledge the side effects and impacts of these medications and treatments. But making a note of your diet, for example, the types of treatment you've had as well. I'm trying to think back to my dietetics now. Like some foods, specific foods can cause irritation, like the different types of starches and fats and things. Eating healthy and exercising will help reduce weight. But in terms of physical fitness, my advice would be just try and hit them guidelines, hit the upper portion if possible. But at least about 30 minutes a day is what we'd normally recommend. You may have heard this notion of 10,000 steps. This is quite a common notion now. There's actually little evidence really to say why 10,000 steps. Some people believe it came from this philosophy of I think it was a Japanese number for health. There's actually not too much evidence to say 10,000 steps is the golden number. It's a nice aim, and it will incur exercise, but it's probably good to aim for about 30 minutes a day of moderate exercise, and that'll help you achieve that 150 over the week.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Okay. My oncologist told me not to lose muscle mass, as muscle helps you cope with treatment and side effects. What's your opinion?
Yeah. So in terms of muscle mass, and we're talking the amount of muscle or the size of muscle in a particular area, muscle mass can help reduce post-operative complications, post-treatment complications. There's evidence even saying that people with larger muscle mass tend to have less time stay in less reduction hospitalization stay. So for the reasons as well, you're able to get up and do more. Your immune system can be higher. You can tolerate the treatments more, and you're also able to do more activities of daily living. If people have a reduction in muscle mass, it can be difficult to do activities, even stand up and walk up the stairs. Or get up and make a cup of tea. There is a lot of evidence out there for increasing muscle mass and strength. And one of the things about breathlessness I mentioned, especially, is the upper leg strength. There's suggestive evidence out there now. It's a lot more molecular science, but you get more oxidative enzymes, so your body can help use oxygen more efficiently. So it is something that I would recommend highly. If for nothing else, it increases your ability to do daily tasks a lot easier, and gain some more independence back. Yeah, that would be my advice.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, is walking a good form of exercise?
Yes.
Good to know.
The simple answer is yes. Walking is a good form of exercise. It's what's up for the individual. Some people can only walk, some people can't run, some people can't make it to the gym or don't want to pay for the gym. I must admit, gyms charge extortionate prices. So walking outside is beneficial. Even during COVID, even seeing people outside on a walk can be really nice. I spent a lot of time in the office over lockdown, me and my partner in the house. And although obviously me and my partner get on very well, I like to see other people as well outside. It's like human interaction. Getting out, yeah, your heart rate increases. Walking on the street, it gets your muscles moving, it gets the energy burned. Yeah, it's a great form of exercise, and it's where I would start a lot of individuals off. So if anyone is walking out in this group outdoors, give yourself a big round of applause, because you're doing great exercise right there.
Excellent. Well, that does lead me on to the last question here, and it's, I'm not doing any exercise at the moment. What is the best kind of exercise to start with?
So one of the questions you're gonna have to ask yourself is what you enjoy as well, because I don't see the value in doing exercises you don't enjoy. First of all, it can become torturous. If you've ever had that memory of being in kind of someone telling you to do something, I don't want to do it. No. And you can actually get kind of demotivated and disinterested in exercise almost. If someone makes you do something you don't want to do, you're like, I'm not doing that again. That was awful. So what do you enjoy? Do you enjoy riding a bike? Do you enjoy walking, hiking in the hills? If you're from the Yorkshire area, there is 1,000 different trails that I'm still finding. I've recently moved to Yorkshire and I'm still finding out all these trails. There's not many trails in Newcastle. So ask yourself what you enjoy. And where to start is start low. There's this concept of auto-regulation, which is a fancy word for basically listening to your body. What can you do? Some people may, and I see it a lot with kind of influencers and Instagram, Facebook people, they'll be doing all these intense exercises, saying this is what you've got to do. You've got to eat these foods. You've got to do this exercise, and just get rid of that person from your newsfeed because they don't know what they're talking about. Start off slow and build up. Don't go too quick into it. Start off with if you can do a 10-minute walk, fantastic. Even walking a flight of stairs. How many times can you walk up them flights of stairs? You can find exercise in the smallest of places. So listen to your body, start off low, work your way up to a point where you're happy, and also find something you enjoy and be proud that you took that first step. The first step, even contemplating exercise, getting from that contemplation to the act of actually exercising stage is a huge jump that we often don't put enough emphasis on. And it is an amazing leap that someone has started exercising. So be proud of yourself, because if anything else, I'm incredibly proud if someone can do that.
Thank you very much indeed. We had a question through the chat saying that